Good afternoon. For today, the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. Today is Thursday, May 26th. The time now is 2:03. Notice for this public hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on Thursday, May 19th, and on Tuesday, May 24th. Again, today is Thursday, May 26th, and it is now 2:03. The following items will be heard this afternoon. We have Bill 295-36 LS, introduced by myself, co-sponsored by Speaker Tina Rose, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Muña Barnes, Senator Amanda Shelton, Senator Jose Pedo Terlaje, Senator Tony Ada, Senator Frank Blas, and Senator Jim Moylan. An act to temporarily waive the levy of excess tax, automobile surcharge, and mass transit automobile surcharge on liquid fuel for 180 days, calendar days, and to amend the appropriation for the Department of Public Works by amending subsection J.I. of section 1, chapter 5 of Public Law 36-54. Physical note for Bill 295-0 was requested on April 26th. It was received and was disseminated to all senators via email by Committee on Rules on May 4th. Those testifying on behalf of Bill 295-36 are invited to the panel. They are. We have Marie Lozama, Deputy Director from Department of Revenue and Taxation. We have Lester Carlson from BBM, Director of Bureau of Budget Management Research. We have Vince Ariola, Director of DPW, and we have Edward Byrne, Director of Department Administration. The conduct of this public hearing shall be as follows. The written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Those testifying be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you are done, please remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony may be desired by the members of the committee. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. The agenda is Bill 295-36. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of the general rule of conduct will result in removal from the public hearing. Proper form of decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for this proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form of decorum will be restricted from providing oral testimony and will be removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name and your title for the record. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me this afternoon. We have Speaker Therese Terlaje, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Terlaje, and Senator Tony Ada. And then our next bill we would hear would be Bill 303-36 COR, introduced by Senator V. Anthony Ada. With that, I'd give my opening statement in reference to Bill 295-36. This bill will waive the excess tax, automobile surcharge, and mass transit automotive surcharges on the liquid fuel for 180 days, calendar days. This 180 calendar days postponement will provide relief to our people, as this will allow fuel companies to reduce their prices through the postponement of liquid fuel tax. The government will have the ability to assess the current crisis of high gas prices on our island from the impacts of the global fuel market and how to alleviate the effects of such high prices from our people. As we are going through a full economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, it is right and just that we ensure that our people live in comfort without being severely affected from the high prices of fuel. As we provide this gas tax relief, this bill ensures to cover the FY 2022 budget of the Department of Public Works with general fund appropriations, as their Guam Highway Fund appropriation level will be reduced. It is our rightful duty to ensure the Department of Public Works will continue to be given the proper funding to serve our island and our people. I ask my colleagues for their support on this legislation. And with that, I'd ask, we have members from the administration. We'll begin with Mr. Carlson. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We're here in support of Bill 295. I just have a couple suggestions. One is more of a question first, and I don't see the exemption of the diesel surcharge. I see commercial aviation fuel. The diesel surcharge provides funding for GRTA, and actually is the source of funds for the public transit fund. And our estimate of the 6-month loss of revenue would be about $156,000. So if there could be some consideration for including as one of the exempted categories is the diesel surcharge. And again, just to be able to provide GRTA with the funding. The only other comment that I have, sir, is that we will be embarking soon on the FY23 budget. I would like to suggest that if the measure is entertained, that it be entertained for fiscal 22 only, and then when we sit down on 23, if the body decides to continue the elimination of the tax going into 23, it could be incorporated in the 23 budget. So if, for example, if it was to be passed today and become effective June 1st, we'd have June, July, August, September. So we wouldn't really hit that 180 days without going into the next fiscal year. I think for clarity's sake and maybe ease of constructing the FY23 budget, if we could just take the action, limit it to FY22, and then entertain the motion for consideration and continuation in the 23 budget. Other than that, the making whole, for lack of a better phrase, of DPW is both recognized, acknowledged, and appreciated. There's road work going on all over the place, including striping work, which really helps, particularly at night. So the ability to continue with the FY22 funding at the level that DPW received and how it's reflected here. Also, again, you know, it's a 6-month, so that number of 5 million would probably need to be adjusted if the bill was to be for the duration of 22, fiscal year 22. Just a little math, that's about it.
Or they both can be addressed on the bill, as you already mentioned, and it's mentioned now, so it's germane. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
I'd ask DRT, do you have any comments you want to make on this bill?
Hello. Actually, just kind of echo Director Carlson's remarks in that we do also support the bill. The only thing probably to be mindful of is, you know, when we did some of the numbers earlier, it was based on a certain price. And, you know, as the numbers continue to climb, you know, obviously then the amounts are going to change. So,
Ms. Lozama, can you explain your statement so we can understand what you're specifically stating?
so when we did the analysis earlier, it was when gas was at a certain price. You know, of course, you know, as you know, in the last couple of weeks, I mean, it continues to climb. We can't predict how much of an increase.
Ms. Lozama, you understand 14 cents is 14 cents a gallon? It doesn't change?
Yes, I know that, but I mean, what I'm trying to say is just kind of if we are going to kind of perhaps take a look at this at the end, or as Mr. Carlson suggested, at a next time, and it may, you know, it may change, then it's probably just a factor to be mindful of. That's all.
Okay. I just hope you understand what you're saying.
Yes.
Because when you're dealing in taxes, it's if we're talking about you're taxing the whole $6 and you're not.
Yeah.
You're only taking 14 cents a gallon, okay?
Yeah.
As long as we understand where we're coming from, or as much as 23 cents.
Yes.
You
So-
just need to figure
so
out
it-
the numbers.
So just to go back, I'm sorry, we are in support of that. You
Okay.
know, we realize it is a relief of sorts to the community, and it is a temporary measure, and it is likely something that would be best if we revisit at the end of the fiscal year.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lezama. Mr. Byrne, did you have anything you wanted to speak on behalf of the bill or against the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. DOA also supports this bill. The Highway Fund is a special revenue fund, and normally, in normal circumstances, and I guess we can all agree that we're not in normal circumstances, the specific revenue and the allocated expenditure are matched. In this case, the bill for a period allows a reduction from 14 cents effectively to 0 for the per gallon taxes. The amount or the length of the holiday was addressed just now by my colleague, Mr. Carlson. Therefore, it was necessary to input an alternative revenue source into the fund, and that is done in this bill, and it comes from the general fund. And I also just wish to confirm that this fund at the end of fiscal 2021 did not have a large balance. It only reported a balance of about 37,500. So we can't rely upon a carried forward balance, so we do need these replacement funds in order that the fund expenditures can continue.
Okay. Mr. Ariola, sir, Director of DPW.
Thank you very much, Senator. From my vantage point here, my major concern, of course, is that the funding for the department stays the same, and it's and according to the bill, the funding source appropriation for this current fiscal year is the same. I see that the sources of funding have been has been sustained to a portion of it comes from the general fund, and there's a reduction from the Guam Highway Fund. So I will leave that to the my colleagues here at DOA and BBMR in terms of the revenue source. But all in all, I support the bill. It doesn't affect the appropriation to the department. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Madam Speaker, Therese, do you have any questions for the panel?
Sure. Thank you to all the directors for their testimony today. And I appreciate that you're in support of this bill. I absolutely support relief to the taxpayers, gas consumers of this liquid fuels tax, as you know, that it would save them 23 cents a gallon, as the chairperson also testified or indicated, as we talked about over the last few months. This is for every consumer without any eligibility criteria except that they are consumers of gas. It includes individuals and businesses, right? So of course I'm very happy that today, what a difference a day makes, right? That you are in support of this bill. And, you know, at the last hearing, we had just received, well, you know, when this idea was first proposed, there was $46 million excess FY22 general funds at the time. Now we're looking at $87.6 million excess FY22 general funds, right? And so it seems so obvious, and it's really not much difference over the last few months, that we are going to have excess general fund revenue more than enough to cover the mere $10 million impact for the current fiscal year, or even less if it's only for the 4 months, and without any need for any reduction to any agency. In fact, that's never been proposed, as far as I know, by anyone, that any agency would have any reduction if we reduce the liquid fuels tax. We've seen the FY23 budget proposals where we're estimating another $72 million more than what we have appropriated this year. And going forward for FY23, I think that this relief that we're trying to give to taxpayers in a reduction of the liquid, or a removal of the liquid fuels tax, the 23 cents per gallon, that relief should be given to them immediately. It should have been given to them months ago on a non-discriminatory basis to every consumer of gas, and it should go forward as far as we can do that. I mean, if we come into a cash crisis again, but right now you are predicting $72 million to spend $72 million more in general fund revenues for FY23 than in FY22 in our current year. And so I fully support that this should be prioritized. This relief should be prioritized over any additional expenditures in FY23. The fiscal note talks about impact for 180 days, which is 6 months, being 4.5 million. So is it correct to say that the impact for a full year would be double the 4.5 million?
It would be very close to the 6-month average, yes.
Okay, so about nine.
Just for the DPW portion of the Guam Highway Fund, because that's the four.
No, we're talking about impact from reduction of the moratorium, right?
Well, the fiscal note for Bill 295 basically has a $4,486,050 estimate.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's because of the moratorium, right?
If 6 months, yes.
Yes, so my question is, if the moratorium went longer, not just for 6 months, and it went for a year, would we just double the impact? Would the impact be doubled, or would it be a different number?
Ma'am, the adopted revenue level for FY22 for the Guam Highway Fund is $21,841,583.
I don't understand what is that? How is that relevant? I'm asking, what is the fiscal impact if this moratorium of 180 days was extended to 365 days? Would we double the fiscal impact for 6 months? Or are you going to use a different formula?
No, what I'm trying to say is that what I think we're trying to focus on in the fiscal note is the impact to DPW's portion. And the column next to it is the Better Public Service Fund on the diesel surcharge of $156,000. So the cessation of the entirety of the liquid fuel tax, which basically is the Guam Highway Fund, right, needs to be segmented. And if the body passed a budget of $21 million, then the impact on the gas portion, because this one here doesn't have the aviation.
Let me just rephrase my question, Mr. Carlson. Page 2 of the bill, section 4, says the levy on liquid fuels pursuant to this section of the code shall be waived for the period that this act is in effect. And if you go to section 6 of the bill, it says effective for 180 calendar days. And then you gave us a fiscal note for the 180 calendar days that the impact would be 4.5 million. My question is very simple. If the bill was made effective for 365 days, is your $4.5 million estimated impact going to double, or are you going to use a different formula? Because this is supposedly a calculation of the tax collected, the 23 cents, or the 14 cents in this section that is being waived. It's just really a yes or no. Does anyone else on the panel want to answer that question? Mr. Byrne, what would you say if the moratorium went on instead of for 6 months, for a year? Would the impacts be doubled?
Madam Speaker, I didn't author this fiscal note, so I don't know what
Okay.
calculations were used when it was actually
All
put
right. Well, I
together.
hope that they use calculations from the Department of Revenue and Taxation, calculating how many gallons of gas are sold and taking 14 cents off of each gallon of liquid fuels, and that's how they came up with their numbers. All right. My next question is, the $5 million that are being appropriated in this bill from the general fund, it just says general fund. It doesn't specify, where would you say this comes from? Because there was another fiscal note that I remember was made on another bill recently where the language said general fund. BBMR had recommended that we be very specific with our language and that we indicate whether it's coming from FY22 revenues in excess of appropriations or FY21 revenues in excess of appropriations or FY23 revenues or some other specification on that general fund. Where would you say that's coming from, the way it's written? Because obviously, sorry, it wasn't included in our revenue projection, right? This 5 million was not in our FY22 revenue projection, so we would be, by making this amendment, making an unbalanced budget. But we all know that there's excess money available, so I just wanted to know from your opinion where that money would be coming from.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. The last public hearing that we were at, we collectively, I think every member that's here today, agreed that we were done with FY21 excess revenues. So my comment to the chairman at the conclusion of the last hearing was if there was going to be a general fund appropriation, that it's revenues collected in excess of the adopted level in FY22.
Well, I support that language because and that's some of the language that I have also proposed that you have, and even we talked about this during war claims bills and all kinds of bills where the same panel said it was not necessary, but I do agree that it would be preferable. So if we were going to use FY22 excess general funds, what would you say is available?
The CRER, well, if you look at the different categories, just about every single one of the different categories that make up the general fund are tracking above adopted levels. And when we do a budget, we don't normally say, because once general fund is adopted, right, the components become the general fund. So anything like to the university, you know, X amount from the general fund, X amount to any, you know, we don't actually call out a portion of the general fund. So collectively, The last CRER says we're $87 million over the adopted level just to date. So I think the language of general fund collected in excess of the 22 adopted levels is fine. You don't have to like pick BPT or corporate or withholding or individual.
All right, so 87.6 million you would in the CRER excess general fund revenue is still available for this bill, you're saying?
At this point in time, yes.
All right, that's 87.6 million. The fiscal impact for the 180 days is 4.5 million plus 157,000, or about 5 million. And yeah, so by my calculations, if we extended this for a year, that would be 9.6 million or 9 million.
Yes.
I round it to 10 million, still could be covered by the 87.6 excess FY22 general fund revenue.
Yes, I think I recall now the discussion, Madam Speaker, that we had previously. And the discussion was that vehicle registration is also part of this, and vehicle registration is a large component of the Guam Highway Fund. So I think, you know, just the gas part and the diesel part it makes up like about half of the total Guam Highway Fund, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
So, if you want to be able to say the
But I'm not
gasoline
talking about-
portion, the gasoline portion is
That's all we're talking about here.
okay. Then I think we're in the right ballpark, ma'am.
Then I'm correct that if we doubled the moratorium from 180 to 365 days, we would still have, that would be a $10 million impact. The 87.6 million FY22 excess revenues could still cover that. Or it's enough to cover that.
That would be accurate.
Okay. And so for FY23, if we were going to extend this moratorium, we would need to prioritize this relief to consumers of gas over any other use of the $72 million more in general fund revenues that's being predicted there in FY23 as well. In other words, the FY23 proposed budget is $72 million more than FY22.
I think you need to say that.
And
In general terms, she's correct. But
yeah, so yeah, to cover a moratorium like this going through FY23, we would simply have to prioritize this relief over any other expenditure. All right, and what about all right, you've told us before that, and I think even today, you're saying there's a shortfall in the highway fund, right?
the last special fund report basically shows that the shortfall, based upon our projection, is about $800,000.
Right, okay. And I remember we talked about this before, this highway fund, which is partly funded by liquid fuels taxes, also funded by other sources, but that it has been short, it's short right now, and it was short last fiscal year, and if I'm correct, it was short the fiscal year before that as well. And that as always, but never was DPW's appropriation shorted, nor the mayor's. And that what you had done, or what you told us you use the excess revenues to do, is to cover shortfalls in those special funds when necessary, right? All right, so I just think this bill makes it very clear, it makes it very crystal clear that with the excess revenues that we have, that we are very much able to give this relief to fuel consumers, to give it to all of them without any eligibility criteria, to give it to them as they pump their gas, to give it to businesses and individuals alike. And of course, I'm proposing that we do this permanently or, indefinitely until we see we have no, that we have to do something else. But as for now, things are looking, good enough to fund many other things. So I would just like this to be a priority, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And I would like this relief to go to these consumers immediately if possible. I see there's a testimony from Exxon saying, if we're going to implement it at the beginning of a month for their tax keeping purposes, and I have no objection to that. Hopefully we can do that for June 1st. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Tello, do you have any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to my colleagues and to the panel today. It's Ms. Limtiaco from Rev and Tax, right? Is that? Lizama. Okay. Mrs. Lizama, you were trying to explain earlier about, based on the numbers here and based on what will be in the next, let's say, 3 months, we know that gas is going up considerably. Can you explain to me and those who are listening today, how will this work if a gas company were to purchase gas? How much taxes, is it taxed right there during the purchase or the cost of whatever they purchased this gas for? Can you kind of explain for those who are trying to understand where they're getting the savings at the gas pump?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
And I apologize because I'm kind of like just stepping into this, but to my general understanding, what happens is, the gas is, the fuel is taxed, right? And then at the, wholesale level, so to speak. And then it is, it is in turn sold, and that's where it goes to the gas stations. And I apologize because I'm not an industry person when it comes to that.
No worries.
And when I was talking earlier, what I actually, meant to say was when we were crunching the numbers, from what I understood, it was, at a particular price point, right? And so it was the, what was the tax that was being paid, the rate that was being paid at that price point. And so perhaps I was getting ahead of myself with regard to the expected increase in fuel. So the thing about it is, and gosh, I apologize, I don't know if I'm misspeaking, but our position is such that, we extend the discount, or we on the fuel. There are certain things that happen, and it doesn't necessarily translate into an actual, savings at the pump. I guess so. In the fuel industry, right? We don't really know what fuel is, kind of like purchased at, and so forth. And so we take into consideration, what we do know. And from there, we understand that there are certain things that come into play with regard to, the fiscal impact. If we were to do certain things, it would require additional staff, changes in forms, system programming, to be able to implement any bills that are enacted into law. So that's, I apologize if I'm not kind of making it clear to the public, but that's sort of the scenario that happens.
Well, thank you for attempting that. I was hoping that we would have a gas company here, Mobil or Exxon, that's doing business on Guam, to kind of give us that scenario and whether they really will pass on those savings to the people of Guam. So if I'm not mistaken, what happens is, so let's say a gas company purchases gas from off-island, and whatever, let's say he purchases it for about $100,000, then when the gas comes in, that gas company would have to pay a tax on it. And how much is this tax right now for, well, I know there's different ones, so let's just go with where it's really going to help the people of Guam, and that's just regular leaded, unleaded gasoline tax. How much is that tax?
Okay, and so that would be basically, so at the gasoline level, the estimated it's 5%.
5%. So that's
Yeah.
what is charged, right?
Yes.
So normally what a business would do would be to pass on that cost to the consumer, most likely, right?
Yes, and like I said, without being in the fuel industry, from what I gather is that,
Yeah.
there's a chain, right? So,
Right.
you wholesaler, retailer, and
Right.
so forth. And I'm not trying to imply that there would be no desire on the
Right.
part of the fuel companies to pass on the savings,
unless
if you will.
Unless they sign something in
Yeah.
front of us saying that if we
Yeah,
are
I'm
exempt from
certainly
the
not. It
yeah,
is certainly not my intent or my
right.
my
So-
implication. But the thing about it is, we're talking about a guarantee, and then of course, in my attempt earlier to talk about the future increases, it was really just kind of to illustrate that things are going to likely continue to rise, and any savings and a saving is a saving, but it may not I guess probably have the impact that we would think it will. I'm trying not to sound like I'm
No, I know
insincere.
exactly what you're saying, because
Yeah.
along that same line, when you were trying to explain it, and we do know, I mean, it's been said on a national level,
Yeah.
that they even anticipate gas being about $7, per gallon by the end of the year.
Yeah.
If we had a crystal ball,
Yeah.
we kind of assess it to that, but we're not for sure. So yeah, it's just
Yeah.
speculation, and we take these based on reports out there and following the inflation and economy,
Yeah.
to make these decisions. But yeah, I agree with you, what you said earlier. Yes, I think the prices of gas are going to continue to go up. But there's nothing here saying that the gas companies are going to pass on any kind of savings they make, like the 5% taxes that they're charged to. There's nothing in this bill that requires them. So my concern, thank you so much, Ms. Lozama, for that. Trying to understand where the tax would be eliminated from these companies. Go ahead. Is there something else you would like to say?
Okay, I'm sorry. So the BPT is just one aspect of that, but the surcharge, per gallon, that's the one that's 15 cents. 15 cents? Yeah. So I stand corrected.
Sure, Mr. Carlson, go ahead. Make sure you don't give us any recipes.
No, I think US DOE is going to step in, and
Sorry, I didn't
I won't
hear
have
you.
to make adobo, so don't worry about it.
I'm sorry? I
said-
can't hear you. It's mumbling.
It's okay, yeah. It normally is with you.
DOE?
The email
okay.
that the director of DRT sent to the speaker first week of April basically focuses in on the gasoline and liquid fuel tax portion, which is what we're here today for. And just to be clear, the email to the speaker identifies that amount at 15 cents a gallon. I think what Mrs. Lozama was talking about was an entirely different tax, which is not germane to the discussion here. So I think her point was, if gas is $6 a gallon and the surcharge is removed, it'll go down to $5.85. If it's $7 a gallon, it'll go down to $6.85. Regardless of what the price is, the surcharge is the constant here. And the information from Mrs. Shimizu to Speaker Terlaje, first week of April, identifies that amount at 15 cents a gallon for gas, 14 cents a gallon for diesel.
And this is BPT, you're talking about BPT?
No.
No?
I'm talking
This
about what we're talking about here.
is the surcharge?
Yes.
Okay.
My apologies if
No
I've thrown
worries.
you off, yeah. Just,
All right, you're good.
So it's 15% then?
15
15
cents.
cents. Surcharge.
Yes.
So Lester, then what is the government, what is the 5% then we were talking about earlier versus the 15 cents? I know it's per gallon, right? So there's a 15 cents per gallon cost for every gallon that's sold. And that surcharge is passed on to the consumer, right, from the gas company, correct?
That's correct.
And this bill, what this bill will do is lift that surcharge of
That's-
15 cents
That's correct.
for every gallon, right?
When-
So
when-
it
yes.
requires these companies, these gas companies, to lift it. So the bill, as written, requires them to lift that 15 cent
Yeah,
surcharge
to reduce it per gallon, correct.
per gallon.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's going to be like the yo-yo because gas has been going up and down. So, I guess we're going to have to like understand what the baseline is. Like today, it's 619. If it goes down to 604, right, and then it goes further down, then it jumps back up. I mean, it's been a real yo-yo. So, as long as we got the assurances, which I believe the speaker has, and as well as the governor, that these companies will, regardless of whatever the price at the pump is, it will be 15 cents less per gallon because of any action taken by the body. The 5%, which is stated at the pump, it says BPT is, and again, it's per,
Yep.
that BPT is collected at the point of sale. That's totally different. It's not anything that we're discussing here.
Okay. Mr. Arreola, regarding the highway fund, it's obvious that this money is going to be deducted from what was provided to you in FY22. You're taking a cut if this bill were to pass. And so it will go from 12,537,183 down to 7,537,183. What projects will not be able to be completed because of this cut to your agency? Does this fund the non-routed roads, the village roads, or what would be cut?
No, the way I understand this, Senator, is that this is just the appropriation funding source that's being reduced. As you mentioned, the Guam Highway Fund is going from 12.5 down to 7.5, but it's being that reduction of $5 million is being supplanted by a $5 million appropriation from the general fund. So the way I understand this bill is the department is still made whole for their for this current fiscal year's appropriation. The appropriation level does not change. It remains at 19.3. That's the way I read the bill. If it's different, someone let me know. And I don't believe so. So we're whole. We're whole, Senator.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's really important because I know the infrastructure bill does not cover, the secondary roads, and it's only the routed roads, and
Right.
I'd hate to see any money
Yeah.
being taken away from DPW with regards to our roads that are
Yes.
so in desperate need of repair. Mr. Byrne, in FY21, in the Guam Highway Fund, the CRE reported, the appropriated amount was $21,661,403, and it ended the fiscal year FY21 with a shortfall and only coming in at $19,714,957. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but these are the numbers that I was able to receive from the CRER report. Is that true to form, that there was a shortfall in the highway fund?
Yes, Senator, there was a shortfall in the collections on the highway fund.
Okay.
We did get some intergovernmental money, which actually made up that shortfall. So the revenues for fiscal 21 for the highway fund were 20.6 million.
Right. Yeah, it was mentioned several times that any special funds would be covered, any kind of shortfalls would be covered. But right now in FY21, there was a 1.9 million. Is that correct? Is that number right as far as shortfall that came in, the projected revenues from FY21? I come up with 1.9. I just wanted to verify if that was a shortfall for the highway fund in FY21.
Okay, yes, I believe that was the case. I don't
Okay.
have the 21 in front of me, but I do have the 21 financials in front of me. And
Can you talk into the mic, Mr. Byrne? I'm
although there
sorry.
was a shortfall in the collections compared with the appropriation, there wasn't a shortfall, such a large shortfall compared with the revenues with the expenditures. So the fund itself didn't suffer a deficit of 1.9 million because reduced expenditures accounted for some of that reduced income.
But it did suffer a shortfall with projections.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, that is
so in FY22, the current report is showing there's a shortfall again of $797,333 right now in the Guam Highway Fund. Is that as of April? Is that true?
That's what's reported in the CRER, yes.
Are you anticipating that there will be a shortfall in the Highway Fund for FY21?
Well, of course, if this bill is enacted, there's obviously a shortfall if you do not count the general fund appropriation that Mr. Arriola just spoke about. It's very early in the game to determine exactly what a shortfall is going to be, because we're dealing with 7 months, and it's less than $1 million this year.
I totally agree, and making that comment could say the same as far as the excess revenue too. That could be also something. It's too early in the game to determine the $87 million in excess. If you're saying the same thing with a shortfall, that you're not quite sure, it's only 7 months into the game. So I agree with you on that.
Yes, you
Kinda
could,
early.
but this is a much smaller number and much more subject to variations than a trend that you can see in the general fund.
I don't think any amount is too small right now, considering the state we're in this, in our economy right now. It might be showing there's excess revenue, but there are a lot of issues that we still have in our community that needs to address, and one of them, most especially, is our roads. Now, I'm not talking about the roads that are handled by the federal government. That's being taken care of by the federal government. I'm talking about the roads that are being paid with general fund and highway fund money. Our village streets, our secondary roads. 797 is quite a bit. I know it doesn't go a long way. I know, Vince, it used to be 1 million a mile, and I know that number has gone up. So there are quite a bit of roads out there that need assistance. So anytime you deduct anything from the Guam Highway Fund, you're also deducting the possibility of getting your village roads fixed, secondary roads fixed. So I just don't want to see that happening. I wish there was, Mr. Chair, someone from the business community. They didn't show up on the last time when we had the same similar bill that was in front of us. The Mobil, Exxon, and all those other companies, to ensure that, their 2 cents on this too. So other than that, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity, and thank you, Ms. Lizana, for your answers, and to the panel as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Senator Joanne Brown, do you have any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to ask with regards, the remaining 7.5 million, the remaining here, because we're deducting the 5 million out of the Guam Highway Fund and using the infamous general fund to make up that difference. Has this amount already been expended this fiscal year by DPW? How far along are you for the Director of Public Works, Mr. Arriola?
Has what amount been spent?
Well, just to know the difference here, we're subtracting out of the 5 million, right? And we're adding 5 million from the general fund. So I'm just inquiring if the remaining 7.5 million, has that already been expended this year so far, up to that amount for your, we're, you know, almost halfway through the fiscal year, so I'm just
Yeah,
inquiring.
I don't have that information right now, but if I'm just looking at the average balances, I'd say we'd be okay.
Yeah, I understand that, but the 12.5 million, I mean, that's almost not quite to the dollar, 2/3 of your budget. How
Right.
much of this is actually expended on highways in terms of personnel or supplies or equipment? How much of this money is actually spent? Because that's 2/3 of your budget for the entire agency. The bulk of your operations is bus.
Yeah.
So how much of this highway money is actually spent on highway
There's,
operations or
there's-
materials?
Yeah, there's different accounts, right? One is for like the village street paving, then one is for the highway maintenance division. Is that what you're speaking to?
I'm inquiring how much of the Guam Highway Fund is actually spent on highways in terms of personnel or materials or equipment, because this is almost 2/3 of the budget of DPW at 12.5 of the original 12.5. And I'm just inquiring how much of that money actually goes into highway maintenance.
Oh, I'd like to say probably 70%, Senator. I don't have the exact number, but
Well, it would be good to know just for transparency, because, I mean, your major operation at DPW is
Right.
bus. Personnel for your bus drivers, maintenance of the buses and so forth. And I just think we need to be, you know, clear as to really how much of the highway money goes into the highway fund. I mean, before they were appropriating money to pay for the mortgage at the university and other places. I mean,
right.
it was just looked at as a funding source, and money was taken out for all kinds of things. So I just think in all fairness, it would be actually good to know how much of this money actually goes into the personnel that work on the highways, and then how much material or equipment for the highway maintenance is being addressed. How are you currently paying for the current, which is nice, everybody loves the pavement. How are you currently paying for all the village resurfacing that's going on now, or new streets that are being paved that, you know, previously were not paved?
Some senators are being paid by the current appropriation that we get every year from this legislature for the village streets, as part of the village streets program. Another portion is we're using some federal funds for that, the ARP funding.
Which federal funds are being used to pay for the secondary roads?
Come again?
I'm asking about the secondary roads. I'm well aware of the federal funding that we're receiving right now for the main routed roads, but for the secondary roads.
For the
of
secondary
villages,
roads, yes. We're using.
How much are they providing for the secondary roads?
We're probably in the $6-7 million range right now,
And
just for this year.
What's the change with federal highway and funding secondary roads? Because they previously did not fund secondary roads that they don't have jurisdiction.
I'm
And
sorry.
is there any formal agreement you have with federal highway with regards to the requirements of the use of federal funds on secondary roads?
What's that? I can't understand, I'm sorry.
I'm inquiring, what are the conditions with regards to, from the federal government with regards to the use of this 6.7 million on secondary roads? You have formal agreements with the federal government for your routed roads, and
Right.
what conditions the government of Guam must meet in order to ensure the continued reimbursement or payment for the routed roads, including things like ensuring, which I saw one Sunday ago on a main routed road, cones being put on the road and being used as a parking lot, which actually is a restriction under your agreement with Federal Highway, but we see practices like that happening. But are there any conditions or formal agreements you have with the use of this 6.7 on secondary roads?
No, Senator.
And is this just a one-time deal, or is this going to be an annual appropriation, or
No,
what's the
these
case?
are funds, as I understand it, to be used at the discretion of the governor. And they've allotted funds for the secondary roads.
Do you have any formal agreement with regards to the use of the 6.7 or the appropriation of 6.7, and what is it also part of your package for your routed roads?
No, this is separate from the routed roads.
So what is the source of it?
This is the same funding that we're using at the different village levels for improvements at the village level, for gyms, for the community centers, for the tennis courts, things of that nature.
Okay,
We're
then
using some
what
of
is
that
it, I
funding.
mean, you know, it could be compact impact money, but what is the source of this 6.7?
I'm sorry?
What is the source of it, though? I mean, the government's just not throwing out money, where's
No,
the source of it
no,
coming from?
we have a plan for all the village street roads that we're paving. We paved streets in Santa Rita, in Agate, Tamuning, Jotnya, Talafofo. So we're paving secondary roads throughout the island.
No, I appreciate that, but again, what is the source of whose discretion is it at 6.7 million?
As I understand, this is at the governor's discretion. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but where's the source of the funding for the governor's discretion? Where's this money coming from? Is it from the federal government or the government, whichever? Where is the 6.7 coming from? What's the source of the funding?
It's federal funds. It's federal funds.
I understand. What is the source of the federal funds? USDOT, where is it coming from? Is it compact impact money? Where's it coming from?
My understanding is it's ARP.
So it's federal money through ARP. This is not, okay, so this is not part of your formal agreement with Federal Highway then?
No.
Okay,
No.
so the Federal Highway at least...
Federal Highway is a $15-16 million grant every year. That's separate.
No, I understand, but they also have conditions under which the funds are spent. Okay, so
Correct.
this is ARP money, that's 6.7 then. All right, is that, I just want to clarify the
Yes,
source
ma'am.
of where that's coming from. With regards to Guam Educational Facilities Fund, what is the source of that funding and what's its intended use? Guam Educational Facilities Fund. Anyone on the panel?
This funds the bus operations at DPW.
Okay, and where's the source of this fund coming from?
That's the TEF, territorial. Property tax? Yeah, I know what it's used for. It's used for our bus operations.
And
The,
how
uh,
long,
the-
and
the
how
source
long,
is
do we
property
know
taxes.
how long the Guam Educational Facilities Fund has been used for bus operations?
I know since I've been there, it's been used for bus operations, so that'd be at least 3 years, and then another portion of it goes to the Department of Education. It's not, all the revenues don't go to DPW. A portion of that goes to the Department of Education also.
I mean, I'll go back and research the original creation of the Guam Educational Facilities Fund. I'm curious if the word facilities was intended to maintain the schools, because I don't know traditionally that this has been used for bus maintenance.
That's the appropriation center that we get through the budget.
No, I understand. We sometimes make bad decisions on this side of the aisle as well, and I just want to make sure the original reason as to why the Guam Educational Facilities Fund was created, what was the intended purpose? I mean, I always understand the legislature and certain members of the legislature are always looking for sources of funding to fund all kinds of things, but, you know, was that the intention, just like the highway fund? It was intended to address maintenance of roadway, and then it ended up paying for all kinds of other things that were
Understand?
not in line with the original creation of the fund. I do have to say, and this issue here with regards to the gas companies, I mean, you know, I have a different view. I mean, if we are in such excess of revenue coming into the government of Guam, we probably should be looking, how do we reduce the cost of government, rather than continuing to figure out how we're going to appropriate and appropriate and appropriate and appropriate and appropriate. So, you know, I appreciate their testimony. Of course, I doubt they'll ever show up before the legislature short of being subpoenaed. I don't know why sometimes the legislature doesn't use its subpoena authority. I'm sure initially we pass this, we will see an increase, and by all means, I mean, if we can reduce the cost right now with the continued increases our people are being attacked with every single day lately, certainly that would be a benefit, but I'm sure we'll see an additional 15-cent reduction, and then I'm not going to be surprised if a week or two after, if not sooner, we'll probably see another increase and another increase. Just as much as I have a question every time they talk about on the news that, you know, the cost of the barrel, the fuel has increased overnight. The fuel companies raise their prices, even though they've already, you know, put the gas on a ship and brought it here and processed it and put it in their gas station. But automatically that cost gets passed on to consumers. So, you know, I don't trust. I mean, they say, oh, trust. The gas company said that they're going to do it. I'm sure they'll do it. But is this long-term going to show a direct correlation to reducing the cost for our consumers? I think that's highly questionable in my mind. I see the chamber also supports it, but once again, the chamber itself has very limited presence these days in the Guam legislature, so it's too bad they're not here to further elaborate with regards to their position. But I just think instead of this whole idea of continuing to increase and how we're going to continue to increase this additional appropriation, be it 85, 89 million, whatever it is that we're forecasting, because we're also, Mr. Chair, putting substantial increases to the cost of government. And that's the one thing I've seen, a steady increase in the cost of government over the last couple years as a result of this increased federal infusion, which, as we know, is very temporary. And some of the people making decisions about this may not be around to suffer the consequences of this continued increased spending in government. And I think that's something that we need to be mindful of. But I'd rather see the discussion, maybe we need to look at our own bills with regards to how do we reduce the cost of government so that our people are not having to continuously be burdened with more expenditure with regards to how the government is operating. In terms of your current highway program, I certainly do, and I know our residents appreciate in many cases either getting repairs or in some cases new roads out on the secondary roads, because that historically, and I'm sure it hasn't changed, been the biggest complaint. In the event, because it's going to be, let's not kid ourselves, if the 6 months and 6 months comes very quickly, this will be after the election, of course. When the time comes to re-implement this, I don't think there's going to be any fanfare and desire to even see the increase. What if this liquid fuels tax is suspended indefinitely? And you don't have additional funds coming in for your highway maintenance? What options would you look at? Because already, even with what's happening now, many village residents will still say they're not satisfied with our ability as a government to maintain the existing roadway system, which is also part of our agreement with Federal Highway that we don't do a very good job with, and then just, maintenance on the secondary roads, or even like what's happening, the paving of these secondary roads. What options would you have?
Well, speaking from the DPW side, the revenue side, the appropriation side, that's not my lane. But I still have to be concerned because DPW has a job to do, right? So I have to trust that somewhere along the line, as we're looking for revenue sources, we typically turn to the mother account, which is the general fund. I remember at one point DPW was funded by the general fund, and as you mentioned, during different legislatures, they find different funding sources to fund the agency, and so that's where we sit right now. I have to imagine if that the funding amounts or the revenue amounts don't pan out from whatever funding source that we have right now, unless there's a change of mind to have the agency either exist or not exist, a funding source will be found.
The last question I have for this hearing is how many current personnel do you actually have that work in your highway division that are funded?
60.
How many do you
60.
have?
60.
You have 60 that actually, I'm talking about actually work the highways,
Actually, yes, ma'am. 60.
Really? Wow. What is your current personnel?
230.
number? Gosh, I had like 19 or 20. I got to figure out that equation during my time that worked on actual highway work. But
I understand at one point they had 1,100. Way back.
There's once upon a time DPW.
Once upon a time.
DPW during Benigno Paloma was 1,000 strong. We could only envy that time.
Right.
We certainly were nowhere there. But thank you for responding to my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Mr.
so
Chair.
much, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Adder, do you have any questions for the panel?
Mr. Chair, with the questions that were answered by asked by my colleagues, I don't have any questions for the panel at this time. Thank you, sir.
More question, then we're going to close. Madam Speaker, one more
Thank you,
question.
Mr. Chair. So this bill proposes immediate relief by proposing an immediate enactment date for 180 days of a relief. So, and as you know, there was a hearing on a similar bill to remove the liquid fuel tax that was introduced in February and publicly heard in April. And pending a committee report, it's a potential item on our May session, which starts tomorrow. So I'm suggesting, Mr. Chair, that if the bill that is on the session agenda can be reported out and amended as the committee finds necessary, with time limits, if that's what they find necessary, that would allow relief to go to the taxpayers, either effective immediately or effective at the beginning of the next month. And it seems to me that the panel here today is testifying that they have no objection to the effective immediately. Is that correct? All right.
Even though it's going to be a headache for you.
That way we can give immediate relief to these consumers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That being that there's no other testimony, again, this bill provides a moratorium that will allow the government to assess the impacts of the global fuel market on our island and provide relief to our people by reducing the gas prices, hopefully, and keeping it low. It is right and just to ensure that our people are given the relief that they need to ensure that they live in comfort and peace. With that, I want to thank everyone for attending this public hearing and for providing feedback and suggestion. The committee will continue to receive testimony. Please submit them to the mailroom of the Guam Legislature or through my email at senatorjoesaugustin@gmail.com. Bill 295-36 Ellis is duly heard by the committee and the public hearing is now adjourned. The time now is 3:09. Jesus Masi for your attendance. And we will take a 1 minute or a couple minutes recess so we can reset and the panel will leave, and then we'll begin with Bill 303-36. Thank you. Good afternoon. Now for today, the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, Housing is now called to order. Today is Thursday, May 26th, and the time is now 3:14. Notice for this public hearing were disseminated via email to all senators on main media broadcasting outlets on Thursday, May 19th, and then on Tuesday, May 24th. Again, today is Thursday, May 26th. The time is 3:14. The following item will be heard this afternoon, and it's specifically Bill 303-36 COR, introduced by Senator B. Anthony Atta, an act to add new section 849.16 to Chapter 8, Title 1, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the designation of a portion of Route 4 as 7 Heroes of Malesso Highway. Physical note for Bill number 303 COR was requested on May 11th and received on May 16th and provided to all senators. Those tests, we don't have anyone testifying today, but the public hearing rules of engagement is written testimony shall be submitted. Please provide the legislative staff with your written testimony. There's no one to testify. I would ask that questions, any testimony or any comments made by the author of the bill stay within the agenda. Personal reference as to the character and motive of any senator or individual is not permitted. I ask all my colleagues to maintain proper form and decorum. And when you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and you speak into the microphone. Please state your name, your title for the record. My colleagues that have joined me this afternoon for Bill 303-36 is Speaker, the author of the bill, Senator V. Anthony Atta, Speaker Therese Terlaje, Senator Joanne Brown, and Senator Terlaje. I now ask the author of the bill to please give his opening statements, and we can move along on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bill 303-36 COR is introduced by myself, V. Anthony, and this is an act to add a new section 849.16 to Chapter 8, Title 1, Guam Code Annotated, relative to designation of a portion of Route 4 as 7 Heroes of Malesso Highway. Mr. Chairman, thank you for scheduling this hearing for Bill 303-36 that would honor the heroes who played a big part in saving many lives of the Malesso residents towards the end of World War II. Every year we honor the memories of those who were massacred in the Tinta and Faja areas of Malesso. That it would be these 7 Malesso residents risked their lives as well to help save their fellow residents from being murdered by the Japanese forces. The men who that we seek to honor were Jose S. Reyes, Mariano Nangalta, Jose Nangalta, Juan A. Napati, Patrico Tyron, Vicente Meno, and Nicholas Charla. In light of their courage and valor in the face of death, naming a section of a highway after the 7 heroes is such a small honor that we can at least do. We owe a debt of gratitude to these brave men which can never be truly repaid. And I welcome suggestions from our residents and my colleagues as well on how we may further recognize these heroes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Atta. Madam Speaker, do you have any comments you would like to make on the bill?
Only that, I absolutely would. I think it's appropriate to honor these men. They were heroes. They prevented a massacre at Atati. Some of them even went further and went out to the ships to try to tell them about the Chamorros that were still on the land and to try to ask them to spare the bombing of the areas where the Chamorros were. And so absolutely, I think that should be recognized. I just would not want to go forward with this, however, without the input of the people of Malesso, particularly the mayor, and that we accurately reflect the names and that we accurately tell their story. I would even suggest that we go further in telling their story, if we can, during this bill, so that it would be memorialized in our records as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would actually highly recommend to the author that he communicate with the Malesso Community Council and obtain a resolution, if possible, in reference to this bill.
Can I just add also, so Mr. Jose Torres, he's recently deceased, also wrote a book called The Massacre at Atati. It's called Atati, and that's where they prevented the massacre. And so, yeah, his book was also his version of the story of what occurred there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Senator Tello, do you have any comments for the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess just a comment. I agree too about the municipal council, but I too would hope that the families of these individuals too would provide some kind of testimony. It would be very right that we read their testimonies too during the session time as we bring this on the floor to deliberate. I think there will be quite a bit of touching stories and support for this legislation. So I thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity, and hopefully these families too will participate in providing some kind of testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Brown, do you have any comments on this bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly concur with the comments by the Speaker and Senator Tello. Definitely these individuals that saved the lives and helped save the lives of our people during the time here in Maritza with the war, or Malesso, certainly are deserving of the recognition. But before this bill certainly is entertained on the floor of the legislature, it would be very helpful to, as you mentioned, have a letter of support or a resolution from the Municipal Planning Council, and also from family members of the men that are listed here would also be helpful, because it's a very small community, and we certainly, I don't believe they will do anything other than embrace this, but just to avoid, so there's clean-cut support for this. Because I have no objections of supporting this bill that's been introduced by Senator Atta. But I think for the official record, it would be good to have concurrent support from the village, so there's no question with regards to the renaming of these portions of the road down south. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Brown. And with that, I'd ask Senator Atta to make his closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did reach out to the Maritza mayor, and he did email back, and perhaps maybe, with my colleague's suggestion of a resolution or whatever it may be. However, he did, this was his email to me. He goes, "Buenas, Senator. My council and I are in full support of delegating a portion of Route 4 as the 7 Heroes of Malesso Highway. For your information, since 2009, when I came into office, my council and I have been hosting the Tinta and Faja memorial ceremonies, and we've been honoring the Malesso Magnificent 7 Heroes. Should you have any questions, you may contact my office." I will, again, reach out to the Malesso Mayor's office and see that we can get perhaps a resolution from them in support of this piece of legislation as well. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Senator Atta. And also in addition to, as the speaker brought up, is that we'd like to bring out as much information about the event and have it publicized. And the people of Guam will know what happened in Mauricio. Not just a few incidents, but all and as many as possible. And with that, there being no individuals to testify on Bill 303-36, the committee will continue to receive testimony or any additional information on this Bill 303. And please submit your testimony to the mailroom of the Guam Legislature or through email at senatorjoesaugustin@gmail.com. And again, I want to thank everyone for attending this public hearing, for providing feedback and suggestion. Bill 303-36 duly heard by the committee, and the public hearing is now adjourned. The time now is 3:23. Just mercy for your time, and please be safe. Thank you.